Alrighty, hello all you fantastic people. Welcome back to Phantom Gaming ZA in the Underverse. We are so glad to have you here. Guys, today we're going to be going through a bit of a tutorial on some of the production challenges and some of the production equipment that you find in Industrial Overhaul. So, you are the ones that need to stay here and view and watch what we're gonna do. So stretch out those arms, stretch out the legs and the midsection, get your bodies relaxed. If you're really enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and that bell to get notified when the next video pops up. So without further ado, we will be going into the tutorial of the production channel in Industrial Overhaul. Right, guys, so first of all, we're going to be going through the very basic, as we all know, the survival kit. Now, the survival kit has two sizes. It can come in large grid and small grid. And I'm just going to be showing you the large grid. So as we know, the survival kit has obviously got its mass that it can hold. And the sad thing about the survival kit is it can only hold stone, and it can only produce with stone. And in the survival kit, if we go take a look inside the survival kit under the production tab, in Industrial Overhaul, we have got 5 things that we can obviously produce, that being steel plates, which requires iron ingots, construction components, which requires iron ingots, basic computers, which requires silicon wafer, but here's the new tang, copper wire. You get electromagnets, which is new, which requires iron ingots and copper wire as well, and then your basic copper wire, which requires copper ingots. Now, still the same as usual, you can put copper ore in and it will give you copper ingots as well. You can put iron ore and it will give you iron ingots. And you can create ingots from stone. Unfortunately, we're only going to be using the ingots. So, excuse me. In essence, what we need to do in order to get these things to produce, right? Oh, you can make basic weapons and basic welders and grinder and that as well. But we're not going to be focusing on the tools. So in order to get producing, you have to obviously select what you want to produce. And you would click and it would put it into the production queue. Okay, now there's 3 types of productions that you can do. You can left click once and it'll produce 1. You can hold down control and it'll produce 10. You can hold down shift and it'll produce 100, or you can hold down control and shift and it'll produce 1,000. Now I'm only referring to PC. I'm not sure what it would be on PlayStation and Xbox, so please don't take me for this. But yes, that would be the controls on PC. So what we're going to do, we are going to say, let's produce, let's say let's just put 1,000 in the queue. All right. And we've got stone already stored in here, 1k stone. I have got more stone in my inventory, but I want to do it with 1k and see what we can produce. So let's go and turn on the survival kit and see what it does. So the survival kit is on. It's going to pull the stone from the cargo container and it's going to put it into the production queue, as we know. So there's the production queue. It's pulling the stone from the cargo container and it's obviously creating the ingots that we've asked for. So what we could do to make this a little bit faster is we could go and take it from the small container, but it seems to be doing fine. So you can see it's producing gravel, iron ingots, nickel ingots, silicon wafers, and copper ingots. It pulls 100 stone at a time, and with 100 stone at a time, it's taking 1 ingot and one gravel. So if you look here, this is ingots. 1 portion of ingots gives you 75 gravel, 15 iron ingots, 2 nickel ingots, 3 silicon wafers, and 5 copper ingots. So if we look here, this should be almost complete. It's got 1 more, and that's its last bit to go. Right, so as we can see from 1K stone, it's produced 750 gravel, 150 iron ingots, 20 nickel ingots, 30 silicone wafers, and 50 copper ingots. Now, the gravel is not really useful anywhere, mainly more in the cement kiln, which we'll get to at a later stage, and that would obviously be used to produce cement. But that is your basic use for your survival kit. If we now go to the production tab, you'll be able to see we can now produce copper wire, we can produce construction components, we can produce steel plates. Obviously, the electromagnets and the basic computers would require you to have copper wire in order to produce them. So we're not going to go through that. I mean, that's very simple. I mean, we can do maybe 100 copper wire. You'll see it'll pull through. It's using the copper ingots that we made. And in order to produce the electromagnet and the basic computer, you would have to move the copper wires from the mass into the survival kit like so. And then you would be able to now go and say produce an electromagnet. So let's just put one in there, and we'll put one basic computer in there. And you'll see it'll pull it out of the inventory of the survival kit, and it will produce that. Okay, so that is the survival kit through and through. So without further ado, we'll go on to the next portion, which is the assembly bench. Now, the assembly bench is basically an upgrade of the survival kit, and if you go back to vanilla and your normal vanilla builds, the assembly bench will basically act as your basic assembler. So if we take a look at the assembly bench, and we go to the production tab, so in the assembly bench here we are able to produce acid power cells, alkaline power cells, copper wire, electromagnets, heating elements, all right, which is compulsory and needed to build refineries in that. You can build light bulbs. Light bulbs do require glass and copper wire, but light bulbs are used essentially for making lights, basic computers, construction components. But now we get new components in here. We've got large steel tubes. We have motors. Now, if you look at the motor, it requires electromagnets, large steel tubes, and copper wire. So very much different to vanilla. Then you've got your radio antenna or radio comm components, which require small steel tubes and copper wire, small steel tubes, and steel plates. So what we're going to do is we are going to take out, from the survival kit, we are going to take out the iron, the silicone wafers, and the copper ingots. And we're going to place that into the assembly bench. Okay? And you'll now see that we are now able to produce a certain amount of things. So if we produce, let's produce 10 of these copper wires quickly. And before we do that, let's go and turn on the assembly bench. Okay, so you'll now see that the assembly bench produces a lot faster than the survival kits, which is a big plus to having it. Okay, and now that we've produced these 10 copper wires, you can now see that we are able to produce the electromagnets, the heating elements. We can produce the large steel tubes, the small steel tubes, and the basic computers. Obviously, the rest of them require a couple of extras, sulfur, all of that, which we'll get into in a later stage. And obviously, the radio components, we need the small steel tubes in order to do that. But that is basically your assembly bench. This is going to be, besides your survival kit, this will be your start off position. I would suggest getting an assembly bench set up as quickly as possible and powered up as quickly as possible in order to get yourself on the go, because with the assembly bench you're able to produce majority of the components that you require to build up the rest of your production queue, your production channel, and get it up and running. So that is the assembly bench done and dusted. We now move on to what used to be the basic assembler, but now is called the fabricator. If we take a look inside the fabricator, in the fabricator you can see there's a lot less to produce, but your fabricator will produce these components faster than your assembly bench. And in here is the alkaline power cell, the electromagnet, heating element, light bulb, basic computer, construction component. But there is, in addition, your metal grids are now in here. Now your metal grids require iron ingots, nickel ingots, and cobalt ingots to produce. Now We will get into what can be produced where shortly once we get to the refineries. But essentially, what you do is you would bring across your iron and your copper and all that's in there, your ingots obviously, and you would put them into the fabricator, and you would then select what you would want to produce, and it would obviously produce, and it does produce at a faster rate than your assembly bench. So at this point we're not going to be doing anything with the assembler yet. I will show you how it works later once we've got our cobalt ingots that produced. But for further choices, we now move across to the assembler. So the assembler looks exactly the same as it does in vanilla, but there is a difference. In this assembler, if we now take a look at the assembler, we go look at the production queue. Aha! We have a multitude of different things that we can make. So let's start off with the first portion. We can make an acid power cell, a capacitor cell, a cryogenic cooler, medical components, motors, radio communication components, as well as solar cells. But there is more. First tab, we can produce our basic hand drill, grinder, and welder with a basic pistol. In the second tab, we can get our enhanced grinder, welder, and drill with your advanced weaponry. In the third tab, these tools, hydrogen and oxygen bottle, can only be produced in the assembler, nowhere else. You can't produce them in the fabricator, in the assembly bench, or the survival kit. And then your basic ammunition cartridges that you need in order to fill up the weapons that you produce. Obviously, to produce these, you can see all the different components that are required: thermocouple, ceramic, aluminum ingots, rubber, glass. So all of this is obviously required from other parts, but those parts will take in another session. We move now to what used to be the basic refinery is now the smelter. Now let's take a look at the smelter. Okay. There is no production in the smelter, but if we take a look at the info, if we take a look at the info of the smelter, just on World Vision, so let's do this. So you can see its max power required is 2,000 kilowatts. The inventory size is 4,000 liters. Productivity is at 100%. Effectiveness is at 100%. Power efficiency is at 100%. Now behind you, there is a difference between the smelter and the refinery. The smelter can only use and produce certain ore. So for instance, well, let's turn on the smelter and we'll show you which ore it will take in. So let's come over here and we will turn on the smelter. The smelter will then pull in the ore that it can. Okay, so in this case, the smelter has pulled through all the ore, excuse me, except for the silver ore. Now the smelter cannot use or produce the silver ore purely for the fact that it is not capable. It is not strong enough and it is not powerful enough. So what do we need to do? We can throw in the stone. Nickel can go in here, silicone ore, iron ore, cobalt ore, and copper ore. Now, these ores would obviously produce your ingots. So as we've seen, the stone produced iron ingots, nickel ingots, silicone wafers, and copper ingots. The nickel is only producing your nickel ingots. Okay. Bear in mind we had 1K stone, which produced obviously the generic, but because this is here, we're obviously producing a lot faster because it's in the smelter. So as you can see, you're producing faster and you're producing more. The one thing about the smelter is it is a nice thing to get, obviously, as soon as possible. And you can produce the smelter very quickly. So let's just take a look here quickly. If we go to the production block, Okay, and we go to the smelter. You can see the smelter requires heating elements, which we know we can get from the assembly bench. Basic computers, which we know we can get from the assembly bench. Copper wire, construction component, and steel plates, which we all can get from the assembly bench. If you go through to the assembler, which we spoke about earlier, basic computers, metal grids are a bit of a challenge because you can only produce them in an assembler. So, the challenge comes in. This is where your unknown signals come into play. You can get a lot of them from unknown signals. But that is a bit of a challenge, but it does come in handy. The rest you can produce from your assembly bench: motors, copper wire, construction components, and steel plates. If we take a look at the fabricator requires basic computers, electromagnets, large steel tubes, copper wire, construction components, and steel plates. All components which you can get from your assembly bench. If we look at the assembly bench itself, all you require is copper wire, basic computers, construction components, and steel plates, which can all be constructed in your survival kit. And the survival kit is obviously by default already given to you, but you do need displays, which you will obviously need a specific production unit to produce. But the medical components are also a challenge. Luckily, we start off with a survival kit, which is a plus for us. So the smelter has just completed. Let's take a look and see what the smelter did. So 1K of all of those ore gave us a total of 650 gravel, a lot more. If we're going to take a look at the survival kit quickly, 750 gravel. Okay, so the smelter did produce a lot less gravel, but with the iron ore and the stone, it produced a lot more iron ingots. The nickel ingots obviously produced a lot faster. The silicone wafers produced more. We've got 750. We have 870 copper ingots and 400 cobalt ingots. So it's a lot faster and a lot more efficient. Now, from the smelter, we move on to the refinery. Now, the refinery acts basically as it usually did in vanilla. Let's take a look and see. To produce the refinery, you need basic computers, heating elements and electromagnets, motors, large steel tubes, copper wire, construction components, and steel plates. All components that you can produce from the assembly bench. I have to emphasize this, guys. This little machine over here, this little assembly bench over here, can produce majority of the components that you need in order to start off a decent base and to be able to produce and protect yourself and build up fast. Okay, so if we take a look at the refinery, okay, it's very simple. It's got large space, normal refinery size. And if we take a look at the container that I've got here, we've got 1K stone, 1K silver, 1K nickel, 1K silicone ore, 1K cobalt ore, 1K copper ore, and 1K iron ore. Now, bear in mind, in the smelter, the silver ore did not get allowed. So let us turn on the refinery and see what it does. Okay, refinery is on. It's pulled through the iron, the silver. So we'll wait and see. It's pulled through the silver. But wait. Nothing else came through. Hey, this is interesting. So let's take a look at where is the cargo container. Okay, so let's see what it didn't pull through. It did not pull the nickel, the silicone, the cobalt, the copper, or the iron. So let's take a look at the small container, cargo container 6. Okay, there is all our ore still there. Now let's see if we go to cargo container 6 and we try and pull the nickel across into the refinery. It does not want to take it. Let's try the silicone. It does not want to take it. Let's try the cobalt. It doesn't want to take it. Let's try the copper. It doesn't want to take it. Try the iron. Doesn't want to take it. The difference between the refinery and the smelter does your basic ores that you can find everywhere around you, whereas the refinery will do your more uncommon ores like your platinum, like your uranium, like your, if we go into the refinery, stone, silver, gold. That is what your refinery is going to be focused on. These guys, very important to note. There is a difference between the smelter now in industrial overhaul and the refinery. All right, and last but not least, we come over to the chemical refinery. So the chemical refinery, okay, is as it is. It refines chemicals. So what we're going to do, we've got niter, we have coal, and we have sulfur in here. Okay, we'll put copper, we'll put cobalt, we'll put silicon, we'll put nickel. So I'm going to basically show you guys what can be produced in each of these production channels. Okay, so we've got all our ore, right? Sulfur, coal, niter, cobalt, copper, silicon, nickel, iron, and stone. So let us go and turn on the chemical refinery and see what the chemical refinery does. Oh, look at that. It only pulled through the niter, the coal, and the sulfur. The chemical refinery is as it is. It pulls through chemical ore. Things that do not create ingots, okay? Things that create chemicals, so potassium nitrate. Carbon comes from coal. Okay? Potassium nitrate comes from niter. Sulfur creates sulfur blocks. Okay? It's very important to note. Now these are your very basic starting, well, I say basic, but let's take a look at the chemical refinery quickly. Now the chemical refinery does require a lot more. Basic computers, ceramic, copper wire, motor, large steel tubes, construction components, and steel plates. Now ceramic will be made in the, where is it? In the ceramics furnace, okay? Now the ceramics furnace would obviously be a plus to get before you get the chemical refinery, alright, because you would need the ceramics to create it. But you can see what it does, and you can see that the chemical refinery is a plus because you do need carbon and sulfur to produce certain aspects of rubber and weaponry, things like that. Ammunition, all of that would come into play. So guys, that is your basic setup and your initial setup that I would say that you would want to start off with from the start game. So we'll just go over it again. Survival kit, right? Assembly bench, the fabricator, the assembler, which is basically your full-on assembler. This used to be the basic assembler, it's now a fabricator. Now you have an assembler. We go to the basic refinery, which was called that. It's now called a smelter. Then you get your refinery, and you have a chemical refinery. So guys, without further ado, we will do another episode with some of the other production blocks. But I hope you've enjoyed this. I really hope you have got some knowledge, insight from this. And I really hope I was able to provide you guys with some insight and some great feedback and some great fun. Alright guys, well, without further ado, until the next session, see you there. Have a lovely day, evening further. Bye bye now.